Today is January 27th, 2019. My name is Joe Todd. This is an interview with Max May in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. You live in Dewey. Sir, where were you born?
Born in Snyder, Texas.
When's your birthday?
11/1 of 52.
Who is your father?
Russell Calvin May. Pretty much everybody around Snyder just called him May.
May. Okay.
Sort of like the boy named Sue.
Yep. Yeah. And your mother?
Mary Robertson May.
Robertson?
Robertson, yes. No T.
Okay. You go through school in Snyder.
I did. I'm a graduate of Snyder High School.
What year?
1971.
1971. What type of work did your father do?
Well, he was mostly a rancher.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like a lot of ranchers, he would do pretty much anything he came to, from build a house to weld on something to fix a tractor. But principally, he raised livestock.
Okay. What'd you do on the ranch?
Cowboy.
Cowboy.
I was raised a cowboy. I thought I was Paladin when I was young.
Yeah. Have gun will travel.
Have gun will travel. Yeah. That was always Daddy's ambition, is that I would simply follow into agriculture.
Yep.
Problem is that they put me in FFA.
Mm-hmm.
And they made me keep books on an agricultural project. And when I figured out what I was making per hour, that was the end of my ranching career.
Oh. Did you raise cattle, horses?
Cattle and horses, pigs, guinea pigs, chickens. You know.
What was your horse's name?
Chico.
Chico.
Yeah, my horse's name. So I watched Chico be born, and then I was in charge of training a horse. That was Daddy's education.
Yep.
And it turned out not to work the way he thought it would. So he taught me, and already knew from all the animals, that you could get animals to do things for treats. And Chico absolutely loved Chips Ahoy cookies. She would do absolutely anything for a Chips Ahoy cookie. The problem was that I do all kinds of dog tricks and no horse tricks. So I ended up with a 1,200-pound horse that would sit up and beg.
What kind of horse is Chico?
Oh, it's just a mongrel.
Okay.
Ranch horse.
Okay.
No particular breed. A red sorrel.
So what chores do you do on the ranch?
Oh, pretty much everything. Daddy had heart trouble. And he got where he couldn't work when I was pretty young.
Yeah.
So his way of working was that he'd sit on a bucket and tell me how to do it. So I have slopped hogs, broke horses, rounded up cows, went to the store after feed, just pretty much anything you can name. Drove tractor.
How far from Snyder was the ranch?
Well, Daddy never actually owned a ranch.
Okay.
He worked for somebody else.
Okay.
We had about 160 acres until I was around 9 or 10. And then grandmother sold the place because Daddy's health was getting bad. After that, he hired out to other people on their ranches.
Okay.
So we worked on the Fuller for Pie Fuller up north of Snyder around Claremont. Worked on the 4.6s down close to Sweetwater, things like that.
What was the favorite thing to do on the ranch?
I have mentioned that I thought ranch life was a little less than profitable. So I enjoy working with animals, but I don't enjoy doing it for free. So I was not a particularly willing. Yeah. Of course, I like eating, and raising something to eat was okay. So as long as we got to butcher out a hog and I got all the bacon I wanted, then that was a little easier to deal
When was
with.
hog butchering time?
Well, in our case, it didn't matter.
Okay.
We had a packing house down there in Sweetwater, and we just ran them through the packing house any time of the year.
Okay. Okay.
You would really like to fare out hogs someplace besides the dead of winter, but it always seemed to work out that we had a bunch of them come out the dead of winter.
Okay.
Calves the same way.
Who was your favorite teacher?
Probably Mrs. Weaver, because she was 4th grade, and that was about the time I learned to read. And I have been a bookworm ever since.
Yep. And what grade was she?
4th.
4th grade. Okay. What'd you do for recreation in high school?
Not a whole lot. I'm not a particularly athletic to start with. And I mentioned that Dad's health was bad. Well, I ended up roughnecking for the last 2.5 years of high school in order to keep us from starving to death.
Who'd you work for?
Oh, Robinson Drilling Company, Westex Drilling Company. Don Barrymore had a little drilling company there, and he was a friend of my mother's. Of course, I was underage. I was illegal to work. Had to lie on the application.
Yeah.
And Don, bless his heart, knew very well I was underage. I just sort of turned a blind eye to it. Worked mostly nights, so I'd go to high school in the daytime and work on a drilling rig at night. That just didn't leave an awful lot of time for a lot of extracurricular stuff.
What does a roughneck do?
Essentially anything that's needed on a drilling rig, but you have an assigned position. So whenever you're tripping pipe or pulling the pipe out of the hole and putting it back in, then you have an assigned position, and that assigned position comes with a pay rate, and it comes with a lot of collateral duties. So for example, the lead tong operator, who's the most junior guy on the rig, is responsible for making sure that everything is greased up and all the oil's full and all that stuff. The back tong operator is responsible for the motors, checking the oil, changing the oil if it needs it, radiators, so on and so on. And the derrick hand is responsible for the mud pumps. So it's all divided out. And the derrick hand makes, well, in those days, 15 cents an hour more. We're making $4.15 an hour. But it was 7 days a week. So you got paid 8 days a week, time and a half for 2 days, which was the best money, that a high school kid was ever going to make.
Yes.
They were sacking groceries then for 35 cents an hour, and I was making $4 an hour.
How deep are the wells out there?
Oh, anywhere from 7,000 to 11,000 feet.
Okay.
They're much deeper than they are here in Oklahoma. All dolomite limestone formations. And I'm kind of an academic, so if there was a book around, I tend to read it. And they left books on geology around the rigs and on drilling engineering. And I kind of completed an education in drilling an oil well while I was sitting out there on that rig. And when I graduated, I pulled a full ride to MIT. So I was, I think, 13th in the class. And of course, nobody in the class knew I was roughnecking. They'd have turned them in, right?
Yes.
They'd have put a stop to that. They just knew that I mysteriously had more money than I should have. But I pulled and MIT's setup in those days was that if you didn't have the money to go, you didn't have to worry about it. They'd figure it out. And they did. And of course, Daddy was going to put me to work every weekend and every time I got off from school if I stayed anywhere close to him. So I didn't. I went to Massachusetts. So the counselor in school was a Bible-thumping, ignorant, and he really knew what he was talking about, but of course, I didn't like the man and didn't listen to him. So Mother went down to the beauty shop one bright Saturday afternoon and got together with all her friends, most of whom were teachers and were the most highly educated people, that I knew, and decided I should be an electrical engineer. Well, I don't know what that is. I don't have a clue what an electrical engineer does. Never seen one to know it, But Mother and her bunch had decided that was as good an answer as I had. So I go find this counselor, and I told him I wanted to be an electrical engineer. Well, this is during the 60s. So we're talking about sitcoms and stereotypes. Well, as you can plainly see from your picture, I'm a little overweight. I was then. I got big, thick glasses, and I did then. And I read everything in sight. Well, over sitcom, anybody that's fat, four-eyed, and poor is automatically stupid. And he just had me pegged, right? despite the fact, mind you, that I'm pulling a 92 average, he never bothered to look at that. Yeah, not a particularly effective anyway. So he told me I should go to Texas Tech, and that was the end of it. Texas Tech's 85 miles away in Lubbock. Was probably a good idea, as a matter of fact, but he didn't sell it. Didn't even try to sell it. He just told me what to do and went on. Well, did I mention I didn't like him? So I waited till I caught him at some kind of school assembly where I knew he was out of his office, and they never locked anything. Went in his office and found a book that listed schools by profession, by rank, and applied the top 3 for electrical engineering, which that year was Stanford, University of Michigan at Flint, and MIT. Stanford turned me down. Flint and MIT both took me.
Now, you were at MIT already, weren't you?
No, this is how I got in MIT.
That's how you got in MIT. Okay.
So I simply looked up, if it has the address of the registrar, and you write the registrar a letter, and he'll send you the forms, and you fill them out.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't have a clue that less than 10% of the people that apply to MIT get in. I didn't think about those places, right? Mm-hmm. Stanford's worse. University of Michigan probably as bad or worse. To this day, I think I got in on diversity.
Diversity.
They looked at that thing and said, "We've never had a West Texas cowboy before. Let's let this guy in and see what happens." I seriously think that's the way I got in the place.
What'd you do at MIT?
Electrical engineering. Mm-hmm. Lasted 3 years. And then somebody offered me so much money I couldn't turn it down.
What? Did you stay on campus, off campus?
On campus. Had
campus?
to.
You had to. Okay.
Yeah, it's a dormitory.
Okay. Now, what classes did you have at MIT? Was it strictly electrical engineering, strictly?
Oh, no. It's a full university. So it has a core curriculum, and the core curriculum has liberal arts, it has sciences, has mathematics out the wazoo. And then, of course, you end up, as you progress up through physics and some of the sciences, you end up in electrical engineering courses. And I was doing okay. I mean, Little Texas high schools don't do a very good job of preparing you for that place. But in order to make ends meet, I got in the Naval Reserve, NROTC, there on campus.
Now, where is MIT located?
Cambridge, Massachusetts,
Cambridge, okay.
just across the river from Boston.
Okay. From how far from Harvard?
It's about 2 miles
2 miles, okay.
down the same street, down Mass Ave.
Okay.
And we traded courses back and forth. Harvard tended to use MIT as their science lab, and we tended to use Harvard as the liberal arts.
Okay.
So we ran around a lot of Harveys, played them in hockey, played them in basketball, all that kind of stuff.
Now, what was your reaction of the people up there to you being from West Texas?
Oh, they thought I was from another planet. Absolutely thought I was from another planet. I showed up with a hat and what looked like a Marlboro coat because I knew it was cold, so I had a sheepskin lined coat. Yeah, I had a pair of boots. You couldn't get me in shoes. Oh, yeah, they just thought I was from another planet. But remember, this is an international university. So we had German students, Hong Kong Chinese, lots of people from the Northeast. It was a very diverse population. So one more oddball didn't look all that out of place.
And you were there 3 years.
I was there 3 years. Mm-hmm. I came in the summer between my junior and senior years, and Leon Patterson was waiting on me. He said, "Fat boy." He always called me Fat Boy, and I called him Fat Boy. That was just, one of my oil field buddies.
Who's Leon Patterson?
He's one of my oil field friends.
Okay.
Driller, tool pusher, entrepreneur, or wanted to be. Leon said, "Fat boy, what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I just got in from school. Go find a job this summer."
So you're back home?
Back home.
Okay.
Yeah. And I roughnecked in the summertime to make extra money to go to school on. That was way better money than I could make anywhere else. Interns and so on. Yeah. So anyhow, the Arab oil embargo had hit.
Yes.
if you remember that mess.
I remember that.
And there were gasoline lines, and everybody was desperate for drilling rigs and for drilling equipment. And the oil allowable in Texas had gone from like 30% to 100%. So it was a historic time when all this was going on. Airlines had a surcharge on tickets because jet fuel was beginning to cost too much money. It's a big deal. And Fat Boy comes rolling up in a Delta 88 Oldsmobile with a big block GM engine in that thing, and we might as well flown to Abilene because he only had 2 speeds, and that was on the brake or all the way on the floor. He's a character that would quit, to say the least. He waltzes into Dixon Drilling Company and he says, "Here you go, this is the boy I was telling you about." Said he can build drilling rigs in his sleep. He's going to an engineering school and he is really good at it. And this little West Texas businessman asked me half a dozen questions or a dozen, and figured out that I had made my way through the API drilling course.
API.
Association of Petroleum Industries.
Okay.
And they have a cardboard binder full of books. And if you do all the courses that are in the books, they'll send you a letter. And that letter says that you have a certificate in drilling technology. Well, it was boring on drilling rigs. I'd long since walked my way through those things, And Leon knew it. He was the one who signed off on me doing it. Dixon Drilling Company offered me $1,000 a week take home. Yeah. In 1974. And I took it, never went back to school. And worked, of course, now, mind you, I've taken enough of the Navy's money that I owe them some years. Theoretically, I'm supposed to go through officer training school, OTC,
Now, when did you join the Naval Reserve?
in MIT. In order to get money, you have to be
When?
72, I guess.
72. Okay.
After I'd kind of got there in the spring that year, then I was in active reserve at that point. But you have to do something to obligate before and they helped quite a bit, the tuition. I was drawing several $1,000s a semester in money. And MIT has the Navy has a big presence, at least in those days at MIT. A lot of Navy officers have got a very deep background. You might remember Grace Hopper,
Yes.
Admiral Grace Hopper, who was kind of the mother of Navy computing and the mother of COBOL. So they have a long history there. And I worked in the oil field pretty steadily until '83. And in '83, the bottom fell out. Reagan had come in and had made a deal with the Saudis, and the price of oil just went through the floor. It was $9 a barrel there for West Texas crude. And the Navy called me up with a really good offer to go active.
Now, are you still with Patterson?
Well, you tended to change jobs every 3 months.
Okay.
So I probably worked for 35 firms
Okay.
over that period.
Mainly in West Texas or where?
Many West Texas, some international,
Okay.
some like Parker Drilling Company or Sharp Drilling Company were great big internationals. Others like Don Barrymore had 2 rigs and 1 yard and a couple of pickups.
Okay.
It was just kind of wherever the job went. And of course I was a driller almost immediately, because rig builder and driller is all the same thing. Well, whenever you're capable of building a drilling rig, that means you're a driller. And I built 5 rigs, I guess, for Dixon. They just had a whole pasture full of parts and pieces, drawworks and superstructures and derricks and traveling blocks and even some cable. And I just picked out what I wanted, put together a drilling rig. Put together 3 triples that will pull 3 joints of pipe at a time, and 2 doubles that would pull just 2 joints at a time, were little shallower holes. And the fifth one was drilling wells. We just got pretty much all the bugs out of it when the bottom fell out. And building drilling rigs is a lot like hot rodding. No two hot rods is quite alike. They're all quite individual, right? And the status bit on the deal is that my drilling rig's a little bit better than your drilling rig. It's got these features that yours doesn't have, you know. So it was a lot like building hot rods, and great fun. And very profitable in those days because drilling rigs were hard to come by. Everybody was desperate for rigs, right up until they weren't.
Yes. So what'd you do when the bottom fell out?
So the Navy called me up, and I had been deferred because petroleum was so dear that the Navy said, if you're drilling oil wells, you just keep on doing that. We'll talk to you after you get through.
Yes.
And of course, my deferment was legally up because we no longer needed all that stuff. And it said, well, you know, you're supposed to go to officer candidate school, but you never finished the degree. And Vietnam's over. We really don't need a lot of people. So if you'll take what's called a 2 by 6 enlisted, then we'll forget about the money. I said, well, that's a deal. So technically, I only had to spend 2 years active.
And when did you go active?
83.
83.
I think April.
Now, did you go through a boot camp?
San Diego.
When did you go to boot camp?
83.
83.
Yeah.
Tell me about boot camp.
Well, so in those days there were 3 boot camps: San Diego, Great Lakes, and Orlando. Now they're down to Great Lakes. But San Diego by far had the best weather. It was an older campus, but it was fairly well maintained, and it was attached to a recruit training center where they do all the A schools and stuff like that. And it's also across the fence from the Marine Corps Training Center. So it was an enormous training campus there, and thousands of people. You have a great big long barracks with bunks, metal bunks like a kid would have in his bedroom, all open bay, and 100 people in a company. And you get one training officer, drill instructor, for that 100 men. Sometimes he's got an assistant, sometimes he didn't. We didn't. And they teach everything from close order drill to naval etiquette to courses on Navy equipment. Pretty much all the basics that you'd expect. And a lot of physical training, which interestingly enough I struggled somewhat with because I was used to working and I was pretty much strong as an ox, but I was not used to running. And it's a different set of muscles. But I got through the place with reasonable marks. And then when I enlisted, the deal was that I was an electronics technician of some kind. That was the contract that I signed, is that I would go into the advanced electronics program, because that's my background.
Yes.
By this time I've wired drilling rigs and fixed radios and done pretty much everything you can think of in electronics. And I can remember I've got 3 years of electrical engineering, so I know all the theory pretty much behind this. So I thought, that was just a natural fit. So when I came out of there, because I was advanced electronics and because I had good enough scores in boot camp, I was a second class petty officer. I got a stripe right out of the back, which was pretty cool. When I take it back, I was a third class. I got 1 stripe coming out of there.
Okay.
Kind of what you'd call a corporal in the Army. That made me a legal non-com.
Yes.
And then went straight from there, literally across the street, into the Anti-Submarine Warfare Training Center which is a little peninsula that stuck out in the bay. And the at that point they rated me as a sonar tech, which is one of the fields in the advanced electronics. Well, whenever they recruited me, they said, we've got this new weapon system. It's new to the fleet, and we'd like you to be one of the first class to go through this weapon system. The problem was that everybody who goes into advanced electronics goes through something called Basic Electricity and Electronics Program, or BEEP. And BEEP is taught from the Naval Air Station Beeville on a mini computer. It's a whole computerized course. And that moved me back over across the street into the Recruit Training Command, which is half boot camp. Well, this is another one. I didn't like that place. They were all spit and polish and bounce quarters off your bunk, and they thought they were the Army. And everybody was just kind of relaxed about the whole thing, And I thought, yeah, this place sucks, I'm leaving. And they stuck me in this quote-unquote self-paced electronics course. And I was scheduled 16 weeks in that course. Well, it took me 3 days to get processed in where I could take courses, 2.5 weeks to do the entire course, and a half week to process out. So in roughly 3.5 weeks, I was gone. I had been through their entire training system. And as an experienced electronics technician, with all the theory of a university behind me, essentially all I had to do was just to get the thing up on the screen and answer the questions and go on. But that put me back at the anti-submarine base way early and completely destroyed my training record. They had me figured out for a sonar that goes mostly on cruisers, an older sonar, and I showed up, 4 weeks out of 16. I was that 12 weeks early or something like that. And the guy said, "What are you doing back here?" And I said, "Well, here I passed with good marks." The guy said, "Well, that's not going to work. Your other class doesn't start for 3 months." Said, "Either you're going to be painting rocks for 3 months, or we're going to have to figure out something else to do with you." Mm-hmm. Well, they had this new electronics program started, which turned out to be the Aegis.
The who?
Aegis, AEGIS, weapon system.
Yes.
Which is, a very, very big deal to the fleet then, and brand new. And they had a Flight 7, which went on frigates. So I got moved into that class, which was the first class taught by IBM for that weapon system, and was trained then on helicopter-mounted sonar and tactical towed array sonar, what was more or less cutting edge in those days. And then was moved through a series of schools, moved up into USS Gary, which is FFG 51.
USS Gary?
Gary. And it was still in Todd Shipyards. Still belonged to Todd. It wasn't commissioned yet. So I'm a plank owner on the USS Gary, part of the commissioning crew. Theoretically hand-picked people.
It was commissioned when?
Would have been commissioned in '84, I guess.
Okay.
So it either became part of the fleet in '84 and commissioned in '85. So hang on a minute, I'll tell you.
And where was it commissioned?
Todd Shipyards.
In California,
It's Los Angeles.
Los Angeles.
It's south of Los Angeles is what it is. Commissioned 17 November of 1984,
Okay.
and I was already on board. Already been moved in. I was in school about a year.
What
And
did you
moved
do
in.
on the ship? What'd you do?
Well, I was sonar tech. And there were two kinds of sonar tech. There was active sonar and passive sonar. And I was part of the passive sonar.
What does passive sonar do?
Listens, but does not make any noise.
Okay.
It's essentially very, very sensitive hydrophones, many of which are helicopter launched. And then you, by listening to the noise in the ocean at depth, you're able to pick up noises made by submarines and surface vessels and all that kind of stuff. And because the sonobuoys are inactive, they're just passive and listen, they're difficult to detect
Now the buoys are located where?
in the ocean.
Do the helicopters drop them in the ocean?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a kind of a big square launcher on the side of the helicopter that spits those things out
Okay.
with compressed air. And unless the submarine hears the thing hit the ocean, there's not really any other indication it's there.
Okay. Now the buoy, is it up to the surface or down or?
Well, it's both. So the buoy itself stays on top of the water and has a radio antenna.
Okay.
And then the inside of that buoy falls out and will reach down several hundred feet with hydrophones. And whenever you're listening to that buoy with the radio, then it tells you which hydrophone is picking it up. So you have an indication of depth and angle this way and that way. So you can, in theory, look up at a submarine and hear it, because sound in the ocean tends to go down. It's just the way physics work.
Now could you tell the distance from the buoy?
No.
Okay.
But if you've got two buoys listening to the same
Yes.
thing, now I can triangulate.
Yes.
And the triangulation is a little flaky with the buoy. The compasses on those things are not that wonderful.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty decent guess. And as time goes along, it gets better. And if you get 3 or 4 buoys, you get a really, really good fix.
Okay.
And I was one of the operators, so the had a big Seahawk helicopter, Lamps 3 system. That Seahawk helicopter carried the buoys, and then the operators on the ship actually launched the buoys, told the pilot where to go, monitored the buoys. You know, there was one guy on the helicopter, and his job was basically maintenance, to make sure nothing went wrong. He had a console, but he couldn't see an awful lot. And there's a lot of computer programming, so huge amount of processing that has to go into those signals to turn the raw signals from the ocean into something that makes sense to an operator. And all that computer equipment was on the ship.
Okay.
It was too heavy for the helicopter.
Now, how long was your watch?
Generally 4 hours.
4 hours. 4 hours on and how many off?
Well, we were 4 section duty, but you dogged a watch. So it was 4 hour. The evening watch is dogged. It's only 2 hours long.
Okay.
And that gives everybody a chance for the evening meal.
Okay.
So it depends on where you are in that cycle, whether you're on, but you can be on 4 hours and then off 12, then back, or you could be on 4 hours and off 6 and then back, because you got a dog watch.
Okay.
Just depends on where you are in the cycle, and it
Where
walks
do you
through
stand your watch on the ship?
in sonar.
Sonar. Sonar
it's
is located where?
It's a room behind the operations center on the frigate,
Okay. Which, how far? On deck?
second deck,
Second deck down.
second deck up.
Second deck up.
Yeah, O2 level.
So you're above the main deck.
I'm above the main deck.
Okay. Okay. Are you in the superstructure?
Sort of, yeah.
Sort of. Okay. Okay.
And a Perry class is a great big boxy looking superstructure that reaches way back.
Okay.
And it's, you know, O2 is the O1 level is the main deck, and O2 is the one above it.
Okay.
And Perry class frigates are aluminum all the superstructure and all that stuff is aluminum, not metal, not steel. They have a steel hull and aluminum superstructure. So it was a standing joke that we called them aluminum cans instead of tin cans.
What were your quarters on the ship?
They were actually on the second deck, so they were 2 levels below sea level.
Okay.
And they were by area, so all the operations and administrative people were in one place, and all the engineering were in another place, and all the combat systems were in another place. There were 3 berthing compartments on the thing.
Okay.
And as luck, remember I told you that I have a knack for being in the right place at the wrong time. Well, sure enough, the Iran-Iraq War broke out while I was still commissioning the ship, and turned hot pretty quick. And I did 2 tours in the Persian Gulf in the middle of the Iran-Iraq War, in what the Navy calls the tanker wars. So this is when the Kuwaiti tankers were under threat from Iran, and they created a dummy corporation in Maryland and reflagged those tankers as U.S. vessels. And then we started escorting them back and forth to Kuwait. This, of course, was a good long time before Iraq invaded Kuwait. Kuwait was still quite independent. And
what were you doing on the ship during this time, during the Iran-Iraq War? What was your job?
well, here's another one of those funny history facts. There hasn't been a submarine prosecution since World War II. It's just theory.
Submarine prosecution.
Yeah, nobody's actually attacked a submarine
Okay.
since World War II.
Yeah.
We've never fought an opponent who had an active submarine fleet since the Japanese gave up. So you've got all these sonar techs who are very highly trained and have got all this equipment, and it's all up to snuff, and you've got torpedoes and you've got helicopters and you've got this whole shot, and then you're sailing into what's a pond, which is too shallow to do submarines anyway, against adversaries that don't have any submarines. So what happens is that you're all spit and polish and stand inspection and so on when you get to Hawaii, and then you transfer into 7th Fleet. And 7th Fleet, as you leave Hawaii, headed for the war zone, you mothball all that stuff. You essentially just kind of put it on standby. And you stand watches for submarines as you're going across the Pacific. But it's pretty half-hearted, because at that point you're not really escorting anything a submarine would attack. And, frigates are low-value targets. And they tend to bite back, so nobody in their right mind would bother the thing anyway. Yeah. So it's a fairly silly exercise, and you generally go across with a carrier group. We went across with Carl Vinson, the carrier. And it would have been completely stupid for anybody to bother that carrier battle group all the way across the Pacific. There's certainly nobody in that whole region of the world with capability of annoying, let alone fighting, the carrier battle group. So when we start in through the Straits of Hormuz into the Persian Gulf, we literally turned off all the sonar stuff. Shut it down, did maintenance on it, and put it in standby, and just ignored it for about the next 3 months. And they used us for whatever they needed extra people for. So the first tour, I was a machine gunner, deck gunner, which is a wonderful place to put somebody whose hearing is vital to his profession. And it turns out I shot sharpshooter with a .50 caliber machine gun. So of course, working on a ranch and being outdoors and distances and shooting rifles, and how ranch kids are, right? Well, I had a pretty good eye for distance and motion since I'd been doing it pretty much my whole life. So they kicked a barrel with there is an area of the Pacific Ocean called the Pacific Missile Test Range. Well, they use it for gunnery and all kinds of stuff. And it's not on a map, really. It's just sort of out there. So the Navy charts have it, the civilian charts don't. And the Navy guys come by and just kind of shoo the civilian boats away from there when they're going to do something. And they took a 55-gallon drum and painted it with a bunch of orange fluorescent paint, screwed the bungs in it so it was watertight, and booted it over the side of the ship and sailed away. Sailed off about a mile, nautical mile, mile and a half, something like that. Then they turned back around, and as a navigation, they had plotted where they dropped that barrel. And then they'd come in and make passes at it like this. And you were supposed to shoot at the barrel. And this particular gunnery exercise, they had a lot of green people, a lot of people in positions they'd never had before. It's interesting to watch them learn what they're doing, because it doesn't make any difference how much you do it in a simulator or how much you do it in practice. When you really hit the real time, it's just a little different, right? Live ammunition and so on, it's a different world. And somebody on the bridge, I never did know who, screwed up. And as we're sailing away from the barrel, I'm on the tail gunner. There are two of us on the back of the ship, facing either direction, and we both are capable of shooting backwards. And we got weapons free. And I looked at my little phone talker and I said, make him repeat that. And the bosun's mate of the watch on the bridge dutifully repeated, you have weapons free. Well, that means the gun's mine. If they tell you to open fire, then you shoot at the thing whether you can see it or not. If they tell you to cease fire, you stop shooting. If they tell you have weapons free, you shoot at it if you've got a target. I said, well, cool. I can see the barrel. This thing is calibrated for 2 nautical miles. I'm way closer than that. Let's see what we can do with this puppy. And I cranked up a 50 caliber machine gun, an old butterfly type. They come with triggers or they come with butterflies. This one had butterflies. And with my little West Texas way of shooting a gun, I popped off about 4 bursts at that barrel. And here comes this little second lieutenant that just thinks he is God's gift. He is just the most important thing. And says, cease fire, cease fire. Who gave you permission to fire? And I said, the bridge. He said, well, that thing's too far away. Stop shooting at it. Okay. And I put the pin back in the gun. They've got you pull them down, you put a pin through them, and then because the guy at the back of the ship always gets the leftovers, right?
Yes.
So you don't get to shoot at it till everybody else has got to shoot at it. So this time, I got to shoot at the dumb thing first. And I saw sparks fly. You're shooting tracers. So the ammunition is, you got a green dot, you got a red dot, and you've got a white dot. So it's incendiary, armor piercing, and armor piercing incendiary. And they make a hell of a splash when you hit something. I mean, the sparks are 14 feet. Fire goes out this 50 cal 12 or 14 feet. At night, you got one burst before you are night blind. I mean, if you shoot with your eyes open, you got one try at that before you can't see a thing.
Yeah.
And shooting a machine gun with your eyes closed sounds like a funny thing to do, but it's the only practical way to shoot the gun. Get it where you think it is, shut your eyes, pull the trigger, and open your eyes to see what happened.
And you hit the barrel.
Well, we got back to where the barrel was supposed to be. It wasn't there. I know when he hit the barrel, I sank it. Well, here comes the captain walking back down the superstructure on the ship. Walks back to the back where his handrail and yells down at the second lieutenant and says, who was shooting at that barrel? It was May. He took it on himself to shoot at that barrel. Captain looks over at me and says, good job, May. Said, next time, just shoot close. And that little second lieutenant's feathers just all, because he knew he was going to hear about that night at dinner. He just knew that was coming. But at that point, the captain decided that I was a wizard with a 50 caliber. And every time we had an exercise of some sort, I ended up shooting it. So they would rearrange the watch schedule to get me loose to shoot on the gun. And naturally, when I hit the Persian Gulf and they needed machine gunners, I was sitting on the same gun I was for that exercise.
So what'd you do in the Persian Gulf?
Well, most of the first tour, what I essentially did was sit on that gun. I stood watches on the gun, and they were fighting guerrilla war at sea. The Iranians had read the book on Vietnam and were trying all the same tactics at sea that the Viet Cong had tried in Vietnam, with considerably less success. So they had bog hammers, which were patrol boats, and they had a whole lot of more or less decrepit U.S. aircraft that they had got from the Shah. Pretty much small naval assets, but they were doing their dead level best to be a pain in the butt. And they would do things like take an old converted U.S. four-stack destroyer, and they'd shell the crew quarters on freighters. So if it didn't have a U.S. flag on it, then we weren't supposed to intervene. And they'd try to kill the crew. And they'd literally hijack freighters full of stuff. One of the things they hijacked was an entire freighter load of Boston whaler fishing boats. Hundreds of the dumb things. And they outfitted them as suicide boats. They put contact fuses in the nose of them, put 500 pounds of dynamite in the nose of that boat, which were unsinkable, and they'd take runs at the ship.
At the Iraqi ships?
Well, at us.
Oh, it's you.
Yeah, they really, really wanted to sink U.S. warship.
Yeah.
Bad. The Iraqis were no particular threat. The Iraqi Navy was never worth a flip. The Iraqi Air Force was worse. So they were kind of immaterial. But we were escorting tankers back and forth, and the oil would go from Iraq to Kuwait, and then our tankers, so Iraq was still getting money to fight the war. They were trying to strangle the money to Iraq. So they really wanted to shut down that convoy operation. And they learned fairly quickly that Boston whalers are suicide in the daytime, but they tried at night. They run these Boston whalers out with very little success. As far as I know, any Boston whaler that ever found a U.S. warship never went home to explain what went wrong.
Now, what is a Boston whaler?
It's just a kind of a fishing boat.
Fishing
It's a
boat.
very nice bass boat.
Okay.
You can buy them up here in Missouri. They're still very much on the market. And they're foam filled. So in theory, you can pour them full of water and they'll float.
Now, was there a crew on this boat?
Oh yeah, yeah. They had the Shah Moran's military forces were the only ones that were well enough trained to navigate, to do much with it. So they put one Revolutionary Guard with a gun and 3 or 4 of those Shah's military, and they'd go hunting. And they'd have the families of those men in a concentration camp. So if they didn't go along with the program, they'd shoot their families. And all of this led to some fairly hilarious things, right? But if the little Iranian guard was still in command of the boat, then that's a pretty deadly piece of machinery. The thing that they didn't realize is that the Navy had put 2 Apache helicopters in one of the hangars on the frigates. So we were flying Army Apaches in the middle of the Persian Gulf under Navy control. And in the daytime, they kept them hid. An Apache is more than a match for a Boston whaler. So, our radars would say you've got a fast-moving target such and such and vector in an Apache on top of the thing, and the world would light up over on the horizon, and a Boston whaler would turn into a colander. And there'd be, secondary explosion where the dynamite went off, and that was pretty much the end of that for the night.
So they had no success.
None, no. And H. Ross Perot had a bunch of oil service platforms over in the Gulf, and he gave one of them, well, actually he gave 3 of them, but he gave one in particular to the Navy. And they put seals on it. They put riverines with the boats right out of Vietnam. You know those old river boats?
Yes.
Which were just hell on wheels. And they were, if anything, more hell on wheels in the middle of the Persian Gulf than they ever were in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Quad 50s and 20 millimeter guns, and Italian radar. They were allowed to buy civilian radar stuff, so they had color Doppler radars on them. Oh man, those things were, and easy 40 knots. I mean, just fly across the water. And they put seals on the things, or they put Marine recon people on them. And I tell you, those were the meanest damn things you ever saw in your life out there on the water. And almost silent. They had them muffled down where you really couldn't hear them traveling. And then they had Little Bird helicopters, which were a special ops helicopter. That thing can go over your head 40 feet up and you won't hear it. Really quiet. So those were all operating off of the did I move that?
That's okay.
Those were all operating off the oil platform. Mm-hmm. They had plenty of room on that oil platform for them. And of course, in the daytime, all very peaceful. You'd see a few military guys out there sunbathing. Not a thing was happening. All very quiet. Sun would go down, and here you'd go. The show would be on. And the bog hammers caught them trying to mine ship channels. So one of the real hazards is that Iran and Iraq both had tried to mine each other's ports. That really was what that war was about, is that Iraq wanted open ocean seaport. And if you look at a map of the Persian Gulf, they didn't have any seaport. And if they could have taken a little peninsula away from Iran, they would have. That was really what the war was all about. Iraq wanted to ship their own oil, directly ship their oil. And they were in a deep water port to do it.
So did the SEALs take on any of those boats?
Oh yeah, yeah. We just vector the closest thing out there, and the SEAL boats tended to operate independently. But we talked to the platform. And the Gary, in both tours, drew what we call Northern Picket Station. So we were the furthest north in the Persian Gulf of any of the warships, with our radars and everything deployed, watching what was going on and collecting data, and at the same time guarding the oil platform. And I opened fire 3 times, I guess, on incoming hostiles over this time, but they were a long way off. And mostly what I was doing was locating them. Whenever the tracers start hitting the water someplace close to that boat, it'd just tell the helicopter where the thing was. And I'd get orders, ceasefire, ceasefire, ceasefire. I'd stop shooting, and about that time the world would just light up over there, and the bog hammer with the little Boston whaler would go, and the pilot would usually report in that the pieces did float. So anyway, made a 3-month tour, came back, did training, did refit, did the whole competitive cycle. The Navy has an 18-month cycle in those days. And 6 months of that is deployed. Well, 3 months of that was on station. 3 months is transit. Went through the Philippines, Went
How
through-
long you on McGarry?
From 83 to 89. I was there 6 years.
Okay.
Or 84, I guess, whenever we commissioned it anyway.
Okay.
And then the second tour, when we ran up, there's something called Gentax. Well, by this time, I've got interested in computers.
What's Gentax?
Well, I'll get there.
Okay. Okay.
I've got interested in computers and have gone and found National University and was in the middle of a computer science course. And National is really military friendly. They'll put professors on the ships that'll teach courses.
What university?
National University,
Okay.
which is out of San Diego.
Okay.
And they have courses that are a month long. Well, you can pretty much predict where you're going to be for a month. So you could take a course and then you'd be deployed and then you'd take another course and like that. And they'd send correspondence courses with you. And they were really very friendly with the military. They would fly a professor out to Hawaii and he'd ride back on the ship teaching courses. Or he'd ride off to the Philippines teaching courses. And, they'd have one professor who was qualified to teach half a dozen different subjects. And you could fill up your requirements that way. And the computer revolution has started in these days. The IBM ATs and XTs, and you remember those things? Well, they've started manufacturing them all over Los Angeles. Everybody's garage is full of computer equipment. And they're ordering boards, and there's open air markets where you can buy hard drives. And the whole thing is just the biggest deal you ever saw. And as part of my training for the Aegis system, they had introduced me to microcontroller computers, the military version of the same thing as the IBM PC. And I thought, boy, that is the neatest thing I have ever seen. That you could just absolutely do anything with one of those things. And bought one. Paid almost $1,000 for the thing. For an IBM PC, and hid it down in one of the compartments on the ship where I was the only one who had the key. And made a deal with the officers that I'd keep the visitors' books on the ship. We always were getting all these requirements. People, you have to have a third-party authorization to come aboard the ship to do anything. So the authorization shows up at one time and the person shows up at another time. You got to track the authorization against the person. It's a big bookkeeping deal. And I had a copy of Lotus 123. So I was keeping all this stuff straight on Lotus 123 way back in a compartment of the ship that was supposed to be sonar. And in fact, the equipment hadn't been manufactured yet for part of what we were doing. So the compartment was useless. Just something to keep clean. And I set my little computer station up and off we went.
You're keeping track of the visitors coming on the ship.
Keeping track of the visitor, the authorization for the visitors coming on the ship. And then they tracked, when they showed up, when they left. And when the thing expired, then they would fall off my list. And they'd have to get another authorization. And it doesn't sound like that big a deal, but there were hundreds of these people. It's just a pain in the neck to keep up with on paper. And I was doing it on a spreadsheet, which made the world much simpler. It was very rudimentary in these days. But by doing that, I could keep my equipment on the ship, which was technically contraband. So you've got the picture. So I'm keeping track of this stuff and learning computer science. And somewhere along in there, they had a Snap 2 computer system, which is a kind of Unix computer that was supposed to keep records for the ship. And they gave it to the senior electronics person on board, who was a Master Chief ET. Well, Master Chiefs don't do work. They have somebody else do work. So the Master Chief gets in the goat locker, the chief's quarters, and he says, who have we got that understands anything about this dumb thing? And my little chief, who never could keep his mouth shut, said, well, May knows something about the things. He seems pretty sharp on it. And I got that Snap 2 system as collateral duty. Should have been a full-time job, but I got it as part-time stuff. And of course, I got it with all the classes that went with it. There were hundreds of hours of training that somebody had to go through. So I got shipped off to this school and shipped off to that school. It was really a good deal for learning what I was doing in computers. But I had to put up with that dumb thing, then for the entire rest of the time I was on the ship. And it was more responsibility really than torpedoes, because the entire Navy ordering system and the coordinated ships allowance that has spare parts and the repair lists and all that stuff come through that computer. And the administrator's got the secret password to everything. So if anything goes wrong, the first thing they do is look and see if you screwed something up. And I did several times and went, oops, sorry, my fault, and fixed it. But the master chief, who finally rotated off the ship, and they pulled in a senior chief, and he was a fire control technician, I guess. So senior chiefs are one step down from master chief. And the senior chief says, nope, you doing it. Fine with me. I ain't touching it, And technically I reported to the master chief and then to the senior chief. Neither one ever told me to do anything. Absolutely, I never got any instruction, whatever. They just left me alone to do it. And I, in fact, have got a Navy Achievement Medal for running a computer. I saved them so much money because you could buy parts for all the printers and all the teletypes and things, but the allowance list said you were supposed to replace the entire printer or teletype, which was terribly expensive and got charged against ship. Well, I ordered a bunch of spare parts and just fixed them and saved them, I don't know how many thousands of dollars, $14,000 one year or something like that. I'm an electronics technician. I've got all the other electronics technicians on the ship, and the spare parts are for sale on the street corners. Just couldn't see any sense in spending that kind of money, and didn't. There's a lot less work to fix it than it was to replace it.
And what's the Gentex?
I'm coming to that.
Okay.
So second tour in the Persian Gulf, instead of being on a machine gun, they assigned me as the Gentex operator.
And what is that?
You'd have to look up on Wikipedia what it stands for, but it's a data collection system where everybody has coded messages about assets, both friendly and hostile, radar contacts, aircraft, batteries, guns, anything like that. There's a way to code, and then there's this big database at the Pentagon collects all this stuff and draws a picture of the battlefield. If you watch Doonesbury, back when Stormin' Norman was in Desert Storm, Gentex is the guy who stands up at the blackboard and speaks complete gobbledygook to all of the correspondents. Doonesbury thought that was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. But it really was a serious system, and it was all computer stuff. It was like punch cards. Each letter in this message meant something very specific, and the order meant something specific. And we got graded by the Pentagon on how well these messages were formatted and the information that we sent back. So this went against the captain's score and the ship's score for battle ease and things like that. And the Gary took 3 consecutive battle ease while I was aboard, which is something of a record. So that thing was judged as best in class 3 times in a row and got the captain a promotion, whom I still hear from, by the way. But anyway, the Gentex system was what's called Tempest. And in these days, this is all top secret, but it's D-class now.
Oh, yeah.
Tempest was the ability to keep a computer from being read externally. The Russians would sail a spy boat up close to something or a submarine up close to you, and they had a way to actually see what the computer was doing inside the ship by watching the electrical impulses. So this Zenith computer we got was shielded against this kind of activity. And working on it was a real trick. You had to very carefully take the shields and everything off, clean whatever you wanted to clean, put all the shields back, and really know what you were doing. So I ended up with a 6-week school in just how to work on this computer. And then my job was to take radio communications and transcripts and recordings and so on and code these messages that went off then to the Pentagon. Went off as regular radio traffic, which was teletype. It's the same thing as teletype, except the telemetry goes across in coded format. And I spent 3 straight months as the Gentex operator. Well, of course, that put me right in the middle of the action. I get to see everything, right? The funny, the not so funny. And I should put in at this point that in between the first and second deployments, we spent a Christmas in Bunbury, Australia, which was great fun. The people were very friendly. This is rural Australia. They hadn't had a ship in a long time, and they had I think it was the 150th anniversary of Bunbury or something like that.
What part of Australia?
It's the western part. It's on the west coast of Australia.
Okay.
And it's just south of Perth, as I remember. Something like that. Again, Wikipedia will tell you Bunbury. But what's significant about the story is that there are only a few things that you can send a kid sitting on a destroyer that will survive the trip. Mama's homemade cookies won't get there. By the time they get there, they'll be green and you can drive nails with them. But you can send Hickory Farms. So they put like 4 pallets of Christmas presents on the ship, and I'll bet you 2/3 of it was Hickory Farms. And in theory, we were supposed to open it on the mess decks and eat it on the mess deck. Well, hell, there was no way in the world. We had 8,000 pounds of summer sausage and cheese squares and crackers, and, there was just this enormous, and a lot of it just vanished, disappeared. Lost track of it, never did know where it went. Poof, right? And people had stuck it in their lockers or had stuck it in places and so on. And I thought that was the end of it. It was gone. They're going to eat part of it. We'll be cleaning the stuff out of the ship for the next year and a half. Yeah, and did. I mean, the next 4 inspections we got hit for some kind of Hickory Farms where it didn't belong. But I had kind of written it off as a big concern by this time. And in between, I had made a master at arms. I got caught harassing druggies, and the revenge was they gave me a badge so I could harass druggies legally.
Druggies on
the ship.
On the ship.
Yeah, we had active drug rings in the fleet in those days, left over from Vietnam. The Crips and the Bloods there in Los Angeles would clean some kid up, enlist him in the Navy, and use him for a mule. And we had active drug rings running around 3rd and 7th Fleet. It was a big problem. I mean, a really big problem. And we'll come back around to this. But during the second deployment, of course, I'm now sitting in combat watching the entire show, which turned out to be really funny, as a matter of fact. So, pretty much, every 2 or 3...
Why was it funny? Okay.
That's the next one. Okay. Every 2 or 3 days, one aircraft would come down from Iraq and would steer directly for us. And we always called him Charlie. And it wasn't the same guy every time, because I've listened to the recordings and I guarantee the voice changed. Yeah. But whatever, we just called him Charlie, right? And you don't let them fly over you. At that point, if they really want to do something, and remember the USS Stark has already been hit by 2 Exocet missiles in the middle of the Gulf. So we don't like Charlie flying anything that looks like a missile profile at us. So before he gets too close, the guy on the radio says, Iraqi aircraft bearing such and such on course such and such, turn away, you're going to overfly a U.S. warship. And the Iraqi pilot will go, hello, U.S. warship, how are you today? I am so glad to be talking to you. Which way to Iran? And the radio operator would say, well, I'm not really supposed to tell you where Iran is. He says, oh, come on, be a pal. Well, Iraqi aircraft on course such and such come to bearing this, which coincidentally would be Iran. And the guy would go off, and the first thing he saw after he made that turn, the first ship that looked like a target to him, he was going to drop 2 Exocet missiles. Merchant, military, he didn't care. The next thing he saw that looked like a target was fixing to get 2 missiles. And he would do a 180 in midair and come back to us. Hello, U.S. warship! Hello, Charlie. Did you find something to shoot at? Oh, yes. Very successful. Very successful. Which way home? Charlie, come to bearing such and such. Oh, thank you, U.S. warship. And he dutifully had made victory back to his airfield. This happened twice a week. And I've got to code this for Gentax, which has no sense of humor whatever. And, Charlie was a fixture. He happened sometimes 3 times a week, sometimes 1 time a week, but a couple of times a week. And that was just his way of navigating. Well, we talked to some of the locals, and it turns out the Iraqis would send somebody to flight training school. Were buying those things off the Italians, so they send them to Italy to flight school. And these were the children of aristocrats in Iraq, not chosen for ability, chosen for who they were. And if they flunked flight school in Italy, these were French F-4s they were flying, they'd send them to Russia to flight school. If they flunked in Russia, they sent them back to Italy, and they just kept ping-ponging them back and forth till they finally passed. They were the most god-awful pilots you've ever seen. I mean, they were lucky to keep that thing in the air, and they got lost all the time. Out there on the water, there's no landmark or anything to look at. You're flying on instruments. And they, in first place, didn't trust their instruments. In second place, couldn't read them things anyway. So that was their method of navigating, is that we had this big radar beacon out there that you could see. They just lock onto our radar beacon, our air search radar. And that was the fixed point in the world. But the thing is that the oil platform and the picket ship that was with it moved. Every 5 or 6 days, they'd up anchor and they'd move this thing over 10 miles and back 13 miles. And, like this, where it was at least not a fixed target for the Iranians. So Charlie would lose us. He was never too sure just exactly where he was when he got there, because we might have moved in the middle of the night on him, say. So, sometime down in this, the Boghammers, they took a garbage scow, and they were mining each other's ports. Mostly mining the Iranian ports, because the Iraqis didn't have a port, but the Iranians were mining off of Iraq and off of Kuwait, where they really weren't legal to do so. And they were using bottom-moored contact mines. Well, a bottom-moored mine, unless you've got a tremendous piece of concrete, the wave action when the wind gets up would walk that mine. The thing would pick up and walk, and would simply walk into deep water. Mm-hmm. And half the time the cable would rust in two, and the mine would pop up on the surface. So these are a hazard to navigation and won't quit. They were far more dangerous than the warships were, because they just go floating down the Persian Gulf. And they're, big as this table with the horns sticking out of them, like you've seen in World War II. They're World War II issue mines. And if you hit one of the damn things, it's got like 1,000-pound charge in it. They make a hell of a bang. So we routinely, the forward lookouts would find them because you can't see them on the radar. You literally got to see them visually. And the lookouts would find them, and they'd sit off out there with an M14 and hit one of those pegs on that thing, and it would cause water to go 300 feet in the air. I mean, they were serious pieces of equipment. And a menace to navigation that was just beyond belief, because you knew it, the Iraqis and the Iranians didn't know where the hell they were. They had no idea where they'd gone, if they were still where they left them or not. So we had a bunch of minesweepers and so on, as you can imagine, sweeping for mines, and had clear ship channels swept. And convoy duty coming in. So off of Al Masirah, Saudi Arabia, they'd make up a convoy. And here we go with a brave U.S. warship with all the flag flying, leading the convoy. Another brave U.S. warship, or maybe two, bringing up the tail of the convoy, guarding the convoy, right? Until you got to the Straits of Hormuz, where these mines were, and then the warships would all get behind the nearest tanker. Because if you blow a hole in a tanker, it's already full of seawater.
Yes.
So what? If you blow a hole in a frigate, everybody goes swimming. So as long as the cameras were rolling and everybody was watching what was going on, the U.S. warships were in the lead, and the minute we got out of sight, we went and got behind the nearest tanker and stayed there. And then we didn't come out unless the Iranians decided to do something stupid.
Like what?
Well, they had a couple of destroyers and a whole bunch of patrol boats, and they would come out intending to sink, damage, or kill the crew on the convoy, on the freighters and the tankers, especially the tankers. We were really escorting the tankers, and the freighters got a free ride. But they'd come out with the intention of shutting the Straits of Hormuz against the Kuwait, and by proxy the Iraqi. And we'd come out and go, bad idea. And generally that's all that happened, right? We'd sail out, get between them and the tanker, and go, Iraqi warship, this is U.S. warship, bear off. And they were relatively cowardly about the whole thing, with good reason, because they had 1950s technology that they were using, gun cruisers, and we were missile frigates. So if they really got hinky, they were pretty sure it wasn't going to come out well. But if we weren't there, those civilian ships were unmanned, unarmed, and they were murderous, just absolutely murderous. I've not had an awful lot of regard, shall we say, for the Iranian military. As you can imagine, watching them attack civilians. And if they were British ships or French ships or Panamanian flagged ships, we couldn't do much about it. And I've seen them, shell a ship with 5-inch 54 guns for hours, trying to kill the crew. And with some success, and just plain hijack the thing and haul it back to Iran. War materials, right? Well, bullshit. Very few of those things were carrying anything that even looked like war materials. First place, most of that came overland. Didn't come by sea. But anyway, so the convoy duty, and then we got stuck back up on northern picket duty, and they took a garbage scow. This is supposedly dumping garbage in the ocean, and put mines on it. And mined that ship channel like 2 days after it was swept.
This is Iran?
Iran, yeah. And we were supposed to come out of northern picket duty, go back to Bahrain, where there was a big LST. It was the command and control ship for that whole area. Resupply, because frigates don't carry a lot of stuff. You run out of groceries and out of fuel pretty fast. And then meet the convoy. Well, the convoy was early. They got favorable seas or favorable winds, or somebody just got their wires crossed and went too fast. I don't know. But they were almost 2 days early. We were about out of something to eat. And remember, I'm watching all the radio traffic go by. And radio traffic comes by and asks the captain, said, "Can you guys last a couple more days?" The captain wrote back and says, "Yep, we can last a couple more days. We're going to be down to dry stores, so we're going to have beans and rice and stuff like that pretty quick. But we've got enough of that to last us most of a week without anybody going hungry. Be fine." Okay, we'll stay on station, and we'll have the Samuel B. Roberts, which was another frigate, just like mine, go and meet the convoy instead because it's already resupplied. Roberts was supposed to come relieve us. Instead of that, they sent the Roberts after the convoy, and it sailed into minefield. One of those things hit main engineering and damn near blew the Roberts in two. So Perry-class frigates are laterally ribbed. The ribs don't go this way, they go this way. And there's two I-beams, big I-beams, on the sides of the main deck. And those things flexed and straightened back out and didn't part. And everything else in that ship parted. You could stand on the top of the superstructure and see the water through that ship. And it floated. Didn't sink it. They got all the watertight doors closed. They got down to the point the main decks were awash. Then got control of the fires and sailed that thing out of the minefield. Had maneuvering motors. The things have electro maneuvering motors that are up on the bow. They put the maneuvering motors down, pulled themselves out of the minefield. And then the ocean-going tugs took them in and took them into Bahrain.
How many were killed?
Nobody.
Nobody.
They had about a dozen seriously injured. One chief got his back broke. And there was some real heroism in this story, much of which you can get it the same way I got it. There is a book on the incident called No Higher Honor. And it's all about the damage control and so on and how they trained the crew on the Samuel Roberts, which was an East Coast ship. Remember, I'm West Coast. Roberts was East Coast. Was, I think, Groton, Connecticut, someplace up in there. Bath Iron Works, one of those shipyards. And absolutely heroic action. Some guy crawled in to an enclosure that had a great big 12-cylinder diesel engine power plant for electricity, because it put all three of them out of commission. Put all three of them out. And the remote wires that control those things were blown in two. And he climbed up in there with a screwdriver and jump-started that engine. Can you imagine being in the enclosure with that engine and the fire coming off the batteries and starting it with a screwdriver like you jump-started a jalopy? Yeah, that guy had got a really good set. I'm telling you. But anyway, they successfully managed to get the Roberts, and then they took cables and they welded X's crisscross across the whole ship to keep it from flexing anymore, and they made everybody stay on deck because they were afraid that any rough water and they were going to lose that thing.
Yeah.
Because if it parted, if it went in two, they couldn't save it. And took ocean-going tugs and took it into Bahrain, which is kind of the shipyards of the Persian Gulf. And they let the crew go down a few at a time and get their dress whites. And there's a picture in the book of the Samuel Roberts being towed into Bahrain with the decks manned, lined the rails in dress whites. This is the Navy's version of thumbing your nose at the enemy. It says, I am still here.
Anything happened because of that?
Operation Praying Mantis. Now, this has been in the news lately, if you pay attention to the news. This was on, I think that Roberts hit it on a Tuesday. And pretty much nothing happened until Sunday. And mind you, we're still sitting on northern picket duty, still not resupplied, short on pretty much everything but bullets. And Ronald Reagan and a Secretary of the Navy named Lehman gave us weapons free on everything with an Iranian flag for 3 days in Operation Praying Mantis. And we sank the whole damn Iranian Navy. So this is one of those things that's, yeah. Remember those 2 destroyers that were harassing the shipping? That's one of them. So we were allowed to stop and search anything with an Iranian flag and fire if they refused. And they all refused. And they left, it says one damaged. Yeah, it was damaged because it was sitting on the bottom of the Persian Gulf with the bottom blown out of it. They refloated it after a while. Mm-hmm. And in the middle of this mess, here comes Charlie. Hello, U.S. warship! We got cruisers actively firing on Iranian vessels. We got Iranian patrol boats shooting missiles at U.S. ships. We got one each of every kind of correspondence you can think of with their own frigging cruiser for the news media. I mean, we have got all the excitement you ever wanted to see, and here comes Charlie. We've been at battle stations. We got missiles on the rail. Now, there's nobody asleep this time on the oil platform. They're all damn well awake. You know, hello, U.S. warship. Well, we got a little southern boy on the radio console, OS. He's got a little old southern drawl like this. And he turns around and talks to the lieutenant just a minute. And he says, Charlie, I said, go home. Excuse me, U.S. warship? Charlie, go home. Silence for a minute. Yes, U.S. warship. Turns around in midair and goes the hell home. Just like he was told, right? Now we're sitting on the air search radar watching the Iranian planes massing above the airfield in northern Iran, fully expecting them to come after us. Mm-hmm. Charlie went home and reported. Shortly after that, you watched the Iraqi planes massing above the Iraqi airfield and the Iranian planes landing. Charlie saved our bacon.
Yes.
There were more planes coming in from Iran than we had missiles. But they weren't about to tangle with both us and the aircraft from Carl Vinson and the Iraqis at the same time. Mm-hmm. So they just stuck them back in their bunkers. So Charlie, after all the help we'd give him, saved our bacon. Because we might very well have not have survived that air attack.
Yes.
And so when we had sailed through Bahrain on our way up north, this kid in the absolutely the most ragged clothes you've ever seen in your life showed up. Neat, clean haircut, terrible clothes, looks like he's been living on the streets. So clearly he's CIA.
This is in Bahrain.
In Bahrain.
Okay.
Comes walking down the pier, and from 300 yards away, one of the guys on deck said, "Here comes the CIA guy." There's always one meets the ship.
Yes.
So that's got to be him. He looks like something the cat drug in. And he comes up, with proper credentials, goes to see the captain, comes into combat and says, "I've got some extra stuff we give you guys if you've got a computer to run it on." Well, you know what happened next. My little PC came back out of that compartment in the back of the ship and moved into combat. They strapped it down with a nylon strap on top of the electronic warfare console, ran some extra cables that they fabricated. The guy had the plans for them. They made up some cables and hooked my PC into the electronic warfare console, and he stuck one of the old 5.5 floppy disks into that computer and booted it up, and that electronic warfare console started doing things it had never done before. It suddenly got a whole lot smarter about signals and radars and all kinds of stuff that were there in the Persian Gulf. So, and we didn't need visitor logs at that point anyway. So my little personal, I paid for, sat on top of the electronic warfare console for that whole tour, running the CIA program for them. And whenever the bubble went up on Praying Mantis, goes, from daylight on a certain date, we were welcome to, and we knew they were coming after that oil platform because that thing was a pain in their side. There's no doubt if they could figure out how to get to it. Well, up in the middle of the day, they shot a silkworm at us. A silkworm is the ocean-going variety of a Scud, Russian Scud missile, except manufactured in China. They carry a 1,000-pound warhead. And the little CIA guy had faithfully told us that they couldn't reach us, that they didn't have launchers that were close enough they could shoot at us with those things, and that there were no infrared seeking silkworms. They were radar seekers. Turns out he was wrong on both cases. Because that thing did get there and went off just about 100 yards behind the ship.
Your ship?
My ship.
Yes.
And blew a hole in a wave. You ever saw an open ocean roller? It takes a pretty good bang to invert one, and that inverted one. And water went. And the reason it missed us is because they were firing chaff shells.
Chaff ship?
Yeah, chaff, window.
Oh, yes.
From the top of the ship. We had chaff launchers. So as it turned out, when the silkworm started inbound, you see the launch because it comes over and then hugs the ocean. So they saw it launch, and every time it come up high enough over a wave, the radar would pick it up. But it wouldn't lock onto it because it couldn't keep a steady signal. The thing would go back in the trough and follows the waves. So we were getting a dotted line coming down from Iran. And when they first started the thing, they went missile inbound. Well, it can't get here. Well, it looks like it might get here. Well, it's looking like it really could get here, And the fire control tech, well, let me back up. It turned out that I had decided I needed a cup of coffee. Now, we've been at battle stations pretty steadily for some hours. So coffee's the only thing we're running on. And the coffee pot was on a big metal post right next to the captain. Big old 20-cup coffee maker. Same thing we've got, except it was strapped to the pole so it couldn't fall off. And I'm in there with my cup, because all non-coms walk around with a coffee cup anyway. That's how I did most of my work, is I take the coffee cup and run what I was doing. And I was filling my coffee cup up in preparation for going back and coding some more of these messages, because I've got a stack of the dumb things at this point to code. And they picked up this launch of the Silkworm. And they can see they passed missile inbound and battle stations, now battle stations. Well, I'm not about to walk between the captain and all that. I just wrapped one arm around that pole and stayed put, because I'm not in the way where I'm standing. And anywhere else I go, I'm in the way. And I'm not going to do a bit of good back there on that Gentex computer for this deal. So I just watched the show. Damn near got me killed. So the electronic warfare console has got 2 rows of 5 red buttons. And these are the kind that light up. And when the chaff launcher above is loaded, there are 2 rows of 5. Port side, starboard side. So you've got 20 chaff launchers up there. And each of these buttons controls 2 of them. Punch a button, 2 chaff shells go up. Electronically fired. Procedure says that you fire 2, you count 10 seconds, you fire 2 more. You count 10 seconds, you fire 2 more. Spacing it out, the cloud gets bigger. I was standing there watching that kid, who to this day swears that's what he did. Nonsense. They said fire chaff and he would whoop! And all 20 of those dumb things went off at one whack. I thought we had been hit. Most of the people on the ship thought we had been hit. 20 chaff shells, these are 3.5-inch mortar shells, and 20 of them went off at one time. Scared the out of everybody. And these are literally right over my head. They're right over combat. And the overhead shook so badly that it knocked light bulbs out, and the pipes up there would vibrate out of sight and come back in sight like an old submarine movie. And dirt, paint, and everything else in the world came down out of the overhead, including Hickory Farms. There was a summer sausage that went by my nose not that far away. I damn near got killed by a summer sausage. And I mean, that thing had been up there cooking long enough, it was harder than concrete. It hit the deck and went clunk like a piece of concrete. And cheeses fell down, and strawberry candies fell down. So the radar console, big old radar console, is just covered in Hickory Farms like this, and the lieutenant is wiping it off with his hand, trying to get the Hickory Farms out of the way so he can see the incoming missile. And the captain is saying things that certainly won't help him get in heaven, and I'm pretty sure they didn't log. Because he's got stuff raining down on his head too, you know.
But the missile missed you.
So remember, there's no such thing as a heat-seeking silkworm.
Yes.
Right. All right. So up on the superstructure, they've got a daisy chain bucket brigade built, and they're putting chaff shells back into the chaff launcher from the magazine. It's stacked back there, 50 feet maybe not that far from the chaff launcher. And they're just tossing them between each other. The signalmen up there are. And then the guy, of course, after the first one he loaded, whenever that light would turn green, that guy was playing whack-a-mole, keeping those lights out. So the minute they got one loaded, it'd go off. So after the first one went off, they'd get their head anywhere close to that. They'd hang them over here, you know. But they were loading chaff shells in this little electronic warfare taxi. Might have been 19. I mean, he's a kid. Was playing whack-a-mole, keeping those things turned out like this. And we got wind going up in every direction. We got aluminum. It was a thundercloud of aluminum foil hanging above the ship. And the signalman picked up one that had a red stripe around it. It was a torch round. And threw it to the next guy, who said, well, hell, I'm not sending it back. And just tossed it all up the line, and they loaded it and fired it. Well, this is the same thing as you use for illumination on the battlefield, right? It's a big phosphorus thing on a parachute. It's a torch round. Well, he fired it. It went up there, and this, phosphorus-looking magnesium fire burns up there. It's hotter than anything on the ship, and goes floating backwards because we're, hauling butt, doing evasive maneuvers, and this thing, of course, goes backwards on his parachute and floats down and floats down and floats down. And just about the time it started to hit the ocean, that silkworm hit that thing. Took that torch round out and blew them. So I'm sitting here today, very possibly, because he made the mistake of firing a torch round.
How many silkworm missiles they fire? Just the one.
And to this day, I think there's some controversy about whether the missile was really there. But if you read No Higher Honor, or a couple of the other books that are written about that period, like Splendid Little Wars or the Tanker Wars, it's pretty well documented. And the SEALs on the platform took a picture of the explosion. They were filming when that silkworm went off.
Of the Roberts.
Of us.
Oh, you,
Gary.
yes.
Yeah, the Roberts at this point is in Bahrain,
Okay.
in the shipyards.
There's some doubt the missile was there?
Well, Reagan had said, if you fire on U.S. warships, if you damage U.S. warships, I'll escalate. And he didn't really want to escalate. So the official line was that it wasn't there, despite the fact that we had 8x10 Glossies. And there's a paddle, or was a paddle, Gary's retired now, hanging in the wardroom of the Gary from SEAL Team 5, the people that were on the well platform, because that missile was meant for them. And we decoyed it off. So that's the story of how I damn near got killed by a summer sausage. That'd be a hell of a thing to have a Purple Heart for, wouldn't it?
Yes. And you were in the second deployment how long?
3 months.
3 months.
We were on station 3 months.
Yes.
And the story is almost over, but not quite.
Okay.
So remember that we're eating beans and rice. We're down out of something to eat. After a day or two, the war kind of calms down again. And there was a helicopter squadron out of Bahrain that did resupply. They're quite famous, by the way. And they had the Dirty Duck and the Dusty Duck. So this whole squadron, all the helicopters were named something Duck. And they loaded those two helicopters up, sent them to us with supplies to get us something to eat. And they, one of them had a mechanical problem, had to turn back. The other one made it and put 4 big pallet loads of stuff down on flight deck. The problem was that some genius in Bahrain had filled the requisitions from the ship from the oldest forward. So what we got was skivvies and 7-Up. Captain called in and says, well, the good news is that the Dusty Duck just dropped 4 pallets of stuff on the flight deck. The bad news is that most of what we got was skivvies and 7-Up. So dinner tonight will be interesting. But after a couple of days, one of the other frigates showed up to relieve us on station, and we went off and filled up all our supplies. And if you watch the news, when the Iranians say they really do not want to tackle the U.S. Navy, that's why they don't want to tackle the U.S. Navy.
Yes.
So I'm listening to the radio, and you made clue here that I was paying attention to what was going on as well as coding messages. But I'm listening to the radio with one ear, and I hear the Solomon, that ship in the picture, fire at a US A-6 aircraft off of the Carl Vinson with a 5-inch 54 naval gun. We looked in our records, and the best I can tell, nobody ever hit an airplane with a 5-inch 54 in all of history. They tried them in Pearl Harbor against the Japanese. They've tried them I don't know how many times since. Nobody ever actually hit an aircraft with one of those things. They're just not built for it. But they shot at the thing. Now the way it's Naval Tactical Data System, NTDS, and the way those things work is that you have a symbol on your screen that tells you if it's hostile, if it's surface, if it's friendly. Yeah. So it was an aircraft symbol, and it has a leader, and that leader is where that thing's going to be at a selectable point. So you can get a 1-minute leader, a 2-minute leader, a 5-minute leader. That's where this thing's going to be at its current speed and course. And these two aircraft are just kind of plugging along up the Persian Gulf. They're moving on the radar, but not very fast, you know. They're at what an aircraft would call loiter, which is the most efficient speed for fuel. And reported dutifully that it was going to come close to the Solomon. Nobody thought the Solomon had anything that looked like anti-aircraft, so nobody paid a whole lot of attention to the fact they were fixing to fly more or less over it until the Solomon took them under fire with a 5-inch 54. Then the little leader on this thing just goes to 0. And the little number next to it looks like a speedometer. It's like the odometer on your car. That A6 did this way, hit his afterburners, and went right straight up. Literally. Both of them just turned right straight up on afterburners. And on the way up, they radioed in, and we're listening to all this, and it's what's called a Vincent circuit. So it's a encrypted radio circuit, and it goes beep, and then whatever you want to say. That beep is where the cryptography makes. So the guy goes beep, Alpha Foxtrot 3, Alpha Foxtrot 3. This is something, another call sign. I'm being fired upon by an Iranian vessel. Request permission to return fire. And you know, couldn't make that guy sound excited. They just shot at me with a 5-inch 54. Yeah, all in a day's work, right? Absolutely no excitement whatever in this guy's voice. Comes back the other way, goes beep, beep. You know, his call sign, stand by. Well, this guy has been traveling like Angels 3. He's like 3,000 feet off the water. Just a nice, comfortable, and he tops out just about 20,000 feet. So he got up there quick, right, on afterburners. And just about the time he comes over the top on that loop, Carl Vinson calls back in. They've already talked to the Pentagon. The Pentagon has cleared that aircraft to return fire. The guy just turns right around and comes right back down. On the way down, he put a 500-pound bomb down the back stack on that destroyer and blew the entire bottom out from under it. That thing went down in 1 minute and 35 seconds. Then he goes right back to loiter. Nothing ever happened. Calls in and goes, beep, beep. Alpha Foxtrot 3, scratch 1 destroyer. Just as calm as that guy had been waiting for years to say that. They say that there were 45 killed. That's nonsense. What the Iranian TV reported was that they rescued 23 of them. That thing has a crew of almost 400. They gave the captain of the ship a medal in Iran, sitting in his wheelchair with his back broken. It is the only country I ever saw give somebody a medal for losing a warship. That is how different the setup is over there. The forward lookout survived because he was catapulted off the ship. I mean, that's a 300-pound steam system, right? That bomb went off in the boiler of that ship. There wouldn't have been 3 guys alive within 100 yards of that boiler. But they gave him a medal. We lost a helicopter. 1 helicopter. In the entire engagement, we lost 1 helicopter.
What happened?
It was an Army helicopter. It was way down south of us somewhere. And best guess is it was about twilight, and he lost his horizon and flew it into the water.
Oh.
Which is a shame.
Yeah.
It's an Apache, and we lost one helicopter. They lost, I think it was 28,000 tons of warships. And we figured something like 8,000 dead. We lost 1 helicopter. Now, you've never heard of the Operation Praying Mantis, have you? The biggest surface engagement since World War II. The last time that surface ships have engaged surface ships since World War II. But because it was a military success and a U.S. victory, news media in this country never reported it. I saw what was reported on CBS News. Walter Cronkite. You know what he reported? The helicopter. So, brother, if there's a lesson to this one, do not trust mainstream media. They are lying. Yeah. At least in those days when the internet didn't have an alternate communication, they lie through their teeth. They bias the news against the military. We had to put screen wire over the TVs. The sailors were sailing Coke cans through them. They were that mad.
Yes.
And you can kind of see why. Okay, so I want to tell you one more story, then I'm going to quit.
We're still going. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So, when we are not fighting hot war, when we're just doing pretty much ordinary operations out there, it was kind of the ship's stores sold microwave popcorn. And there was a big Amana radar range. There was one in the chief's quarters, there was one in the wardroom, and there was one in the mess decks, enlisted mess decks. And they were bought with ship's recreation funds. They were not Navy issue. I'm not sure there were even Navy issue microwaves in existence in those days. I'm sure there are now, but in those days, the civilian stuff was about all you had. And the helicopter pilots, as well as a lot of other groups on the ship, tended to keep popcorn, and in the middle of the night, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, if you were doing night ops, which of course, as I told you a while ago, that was pretty much what we did and trained for, they'd tend to go down, usually to the mess decks, and pop a bag of popcorn. So they'd fly the Seahawk back in. They had 2 crews. They'd trade out crews. The crew that was coming off would go down, get some popcorn, get some coffee, rest a while, sort of debrief the mission. And the other crew would go up, and then they'd do their training exercise. And we did this going across the ocean routinely to get everybody in use, because flight ops on a destroyer is kind of a deal. FOD walkdowns and all of that stuff is just not common for destroyers, and we had to get all that aircraft stuff figured out. Plus, our electronics technicians maintained a lot of the aircraft electronics. They didn't come with an entire contingent, an air wing. They just came with a crew and a bird and a couple of specialists, and we filled in all the blanks. So I was cross-trained on the aircraft. I maintained the sonar stuff on the aircraft, as well as the shipboard stuff. Well, they pick aircraft pilots for dependability, for attention to detail. They are, some of them, not the sharpest knives in the drawer. They are wonderful people as a rule, very moral, very ethical, not always the sharpest knife. So somebody told one of the pilots that if you put the popcorn on a clipboard, it would pop better. Fiberboard clipboard with a metal clip on it in the bottom of the microwave, and he popped his popcorn. He burned up the microwave. All those sparks flying around in that thing bother him at all. He thought it was supposed to do that. So now, the entire enlisted population of the ship has no microwave. Because the crew's like the wardroom and the goat locker are all locked up. Right, you can't get in them. So you either have to sweet talk a chief into popping the popcorn for you, which, most of the chiefs went to bed at night. And they weren't too fond of somebody getting up running the microwave in the middle of the night. So we're without a radar, without a microwave. We got all this popcorn. We got no way to pop it on the midwatch. Midwatch is midnight to 4 in the morning. And so the chief ET goes to see if he can fix the microwave. Kid's a first class, damn good electronics technician. He was just first class. There aren't too many people I've met in my life that I thought were better electronics technicians than I am. He's one of them. He just sat and studied the subject, right? But there just weren't parts on the ship. We needed 3 or 1 big diode for that thing was burned up. It knocked out a diode. And we literally didn't have enough diodes on the ship to make up one that size. The thing was just huge. The amount of current it would carry was beyond anything we had. And we couldn't fix it. So we're sailing along in the middle of the Indian Ocean, plugging along, going somewhere, probably after a convoy. And the fire control techs who've got a couple of boxes of popcorn they can't figure out how to pop wake up to the fact that they've got a microwave generator. It's called a radar. And they looked up the frequency, and it's not that far from the frequency of a microwave oven. So, well, you reckon this would work? Well, I don't know, but you'd have to be pretty careful. Well, how would you do it? Well, you got a test pulse for that radar. Said we can set a test pulse off pretty much anytime we want to. Why don't we see if we can get a bag of popcorn in the way and set off the test pulse? So they stapled a bag of microwave popcorn to a broom handle. And up in the middle of the night, and not telling anybody because this is illegal as all hell, they get the antenna pointed just like they wanted, and the guy goes out there with the broom and sticks it way up in the air like that. Goes, okay. His buddy goes like this, and they go beep on the radar. And the popcorn pops at once, simultaneously, and the bag catches fire on the end of the broom. The guy goes, well, hell. Walks over, tosses it over the edge of the ship, right? Problem is, we got an aft lookout, and he's awake. And this burning broom comes sailing down the ocean behind the ship, and he reports it to the bridge. Burning object at sea. And the ship turns around to see what it is because they can't figure out what's burning at sea. And by the time they get back there, the thing has gone out, the broom sank. And they logged it. So somewhere in the Naval Archives, and this is the first time the U.S. Navy, if they ever see this film, will know what really happened. They actually turned around to find a burning bag of popcorn in the middle of the Arabian Sea. And the story keeps going. So we pull into Bahrain, and the first class ET gets a phone call. We chip in some money, because it's like $3 a minute. Tim Erickson was the guy's name, and he calls Tracy his wife, who is kind of a political activist. Tracy is kind of typical Southern California, you know. She'll go out at the drop of a hat, she'll organize a demonstration or something. And calls her on the phone asking for the part for the microwave. Ship it to him so he can fix the microwave. Because we get regular mail service and she can mail him the diode from Amana. Go down to the appliance store. There are no appliance stores, as it turns out, in the Persian Gulf. We tried everything we could think of. There's no Radio Shack. There's no appliance stores. You flat can't buy parts. Tracy, of course, this is a long-distance phone call, and she gets about half the message. Well, she gets the part, and she gets the part number. And she gets that it's made by Amana, but she doesn't get the range part. She gets the radar part. And she calls her congressman and says, my husband is in the middle of the Persian Gulf in a hot war situation and he can't get parts for his radar. He's got me shipping him parts. And then, politely ships Tim what he asked for the parts store. And doesn't mean anything to Tracy that she's an appliance store. Never occurs to her, because Tim fixes everything you can think of, and he's just as likely to order it from the parts store as he is from the, She didn't think anything about that because it's pretty much normal stuff. We're jury rigging and, So anyway, she ships Tim the diode that he's after, and the congressman gets on the horn to the Pentagon, and the captain gets a radio message, and Tim gets called to the captain's cabin, and the captain says, what is this about you can't get parts for your radar? And Tim, of course, is completely lost at this point. And it takes him about 30 seconds to get the whole thing tied together. He says, oh, no, sir, not radar. Radar range. It's the microwave. Well, why is the congressman on my back about a microwave? Oh, well, I called my wife. Anyway, the package caught up with us someplace out in the middle of the Arabian Sea. We put the microwave back together, and we were just heroes because now you could pop your popcorn again. I told you it turned out to be pretty funny.
Yes. And was that pretty much the end of that deployment?
Several other things along in the same vein happened, but certainly Operation Praying Mantis was the high point.
Yes.
And then when we got back in the next rotation, I was due to rotate off ship. And I'd already converted from a 2 years active to 6 years active, and they wanted me to go recruiting. And I was not all that. So I let them put me on the inactive reserve.
Okay. When did you go inactive reserve?
89.
89.
I was 6 years, day for day, active.
Mm-hmm.
And a degree in computer science as I went along. So about all I did then was figure out what the civilians called it. Went back to work in the civilian world as a SCADA engineer, and I still am.
Where?
I went to work originally in California.
Okay. So when did you come to Oklahoma?
Well, so I made a SCADA engineer, automation engineer.
Okay.
This is somebody who works on machinery that works by itself. Well, a sonar is a big SCADA system. It's nothing in the world but a SCADA-driven stereo. That's what it is.
A SCADA driven?
SCADA, yeah.
SCADA.
SCADA is an acronym, Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition.
Okay.
It's an engineering field. And many of the things that you use daily are run by SCADA systems.
Okay.
Stoplights, for example. Your water system is a SCADA system. Your electrical system is SCADA. And I always was fascinated by taking computers and making them do things in the real world, other than just process data, really tying them to the real world, and that's SCADA. So I went to work first out in California and then back in Odessa, back in Texas, rebuilding SCADA systems, because now I'm qualified, and there's a lot of programming involved, as well as a lot of electrical engineering. And I was working on plastics plants and refineries and gas processing plants around Odessa, both for other companies and as a freelancer. And I got a call on the telephone. I was on the internet, which had become a deal by this time. And I was up on the internet looking for work and hit someplace out in San Francisco and got a call on the phone, and they said, would you think about coming out to Northern California, the wine country of Northern California? Said, we need somebody with your skill set, and they're willing to relocate you. And, nice bump in pay. Well, the wife has asthma, pretty seriously. And the dust in West Texas was just tearing her up. So I'm sitting in my home office, and I'm listening to her coughing in the other room, figuring I'm going to have to put her back in the hospital. And there's a tumbleweed rolling down the road the size of a Volkswagen, and dirt's 150 feet in the air. I said, yeah, I'd think about it. I sure enough would think about it. So they moved me to Santa Rosa, California, family and all. And I worked for JDS Uniphase.
Who?
JDS Uniphase,
Okay.
which manufactures a lot of the equipment around the internet. They do fiber optics, and they do fiber optic couplers. They manufacture a lot of the hardware that ties fiber optics together, and the amplifiers that go in line, and lots and lots and lots of other optical stuff. Built lenses for Edmund Scientific microscopes. And worked in the instrumentation for them for years, 6-7 years or so. And formally finished my degree while I was at it. Then was hired by a semiconductor manufacturing firm in Colorado Springs, who again moved me to Colorado Springs. And I worked for what's now Microchip, the big semiconductor foundry, they call it, there in Colorado Springs, for some more years. And then I'm getting pretty close to retirement, and they held a big layoff. Well, they don't like old engineers, they like new kids. So they got a whole bunch of us old heads there at Micron. And I was freelancing, contracting, consulting, and not doing too bad, but and then ABB out here west of Bartlesville called me on the phone and said, we need somebody with your skill set, and we think you used to work on some of this stuff anyway. Well, I had back in the oil field. And I flew out here, and they decided I was the answer to their prayers because they had a couple of products they literally couldn't get to ship. And they moved me out here. And when they moved me out here, I told them that I'm going to retire from here. This is a quiet community. It's an older community. It's much slower than Colorado Springs or San Francisco. It's a nice place to retire. So you just understand, you know, that when I leave here, I'm going to retire. And sure enough, they figured out an assignment I didn't want, and I retired on it.
When'd you retire?
September of last year. No,
year.
I take that back. It's been a year ago, September
Okay. So 2018?
18.
18.
And stayed retired almost 3 weeks.
Then what'd you do?
Well, as you're well aware, a lot of the Lodge brothers here belong to water boards, rural water boards out around the county. George, for example, Bob Reese, George Reynolds, Bob Reese, several more. And York Wright needed a computer. Well, I've only done this now for something like 30 years. So Bob Attenberry comes along and says, we really need a computer. And I said, I think $600. He said, you can't do it for that. I said, probably can if you don't hurry me. I said, the computer's $1,000. No, not for what you need. And I put Bob a computer, a laser printer, and a copy of QuickBooks in the York Wright office for $622. And George Reynolds watched me do it. And he knew that this was what I was doing at ABB. And he says, here's a card to the guys that run the management firm that runs all these rural water districts. They really need your help. And I said, George, I'm retired. I get to come up here and drink coffee anytime I want to. He says, I really need your help. Oh, shit. So they simply blackmailed me into helping the water. It's utility management construction company down here in Oshaleta. And I'm rebuilding rural water districts for UMCCO. And now I've got Copan Water District, the city of Copan, the city of Nowata, and about 3 more of them.
I'm on Verdigris Valley.
Yeah. So I suspect, the water districts for UMCCO are everywhere from Independence, Kansas to the Tulsa County line. There's 13 of them. And he just bid on 4 more. So I've got water districts now over, and it's the same thing. It's SCADA. It's the same thing I did in the Navy. So with a degree, I don't have a degree, but I've got an awful lot of undergraduate education at MIT, and I've got an awful lot of Navy training. And you can guess which one I use every day.
Yes.
The Navy training.
Yep. Would you join the Navy again?
Yes, in a heartbeat. If I was young. Best education a man can buy.
I'd like to do a word association. I'll give you some words and you give me your reaction.
Okay.
First one is boot camp.
School.
MIT.
Pressure cooker.
Electrical engineering.
It's a great way to make a living. Absolutely great way to make a living. And now it is so diverse that there are probably 50 fields, all of which were electrical engineering when I started.
USS Gary.
Home.
Iran-Iraq War.
Hilarious. That whole thing was funny.
Operation Praying Mantis.
I guess I'd have to say summer sausage. That's the single thing that stands out the most.
U.S. Navy.
Probably the most effective organization I ever worked for. They really are.
Ronald Reagan.
Great guy. Absolutely great guy.
George Bush.
Which one?
First one.
Not worth a damn. Bureaucrat.
How do you want to be remembered?
As somebody that sees the lighter side of life, much of what I've done has been quite serious. Many SCADA systems will kill you. You're always trying to be sure that you don't actually hurt somebody with SCADA systems. And yet, our lives depend on them. The way we live and everything is dependent on them.
Anything else you want to talk about?
I think we've had enough for one day.
Well, sir, this is an excellent interview.
Well, I'm glad you liked it.
I want to thank you for your service and thank you for the interview.
Oh, you bet.
And again, this is January 27th, 2019. My name is Joe Todd. This has been an interview with Max May in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Thank you.